ago and saw an eagle, and I had to think to myself, you know, that ban on DDT really made a difference. It did. And it's that long-term perspective that I want to talk to you about a little bit today. But before I do that, I want to emphasize one other thing, and that's what Joel talked about and what Andy talked about, and that is the city of Detroit, and all the other cities in Michigan, and their importance to the future. I don't know about the other states, but in Michigan we have a significant problem. Our significant problem is that our young people, our educated people, are leaving. 40% of our college graduates leave this state and don't come back. We rank 47th out of the 50 states in attracting highly educated young people to our state. That is not a recipe for success over the long term. And one of the key components that we know is true is that those young people are looking for certain things. They're looking for cities that are vibrant. They're looking for regional transit systems that work. All things that are consistent with your notion of what sustainable development is all about. Cities are a key component. Michigan, the governor has said, Governor Snyder has said, and Governor Milliken said it 30 years ago, Michigan cannot be successful without a successful Detroit. So all of us have an obligation to help. For those of you who haven't been there yet, I just urge you to walk down to the riverfront and see Milliken Park. It was dedicated in his honor last year. You got to see the park, Milliken Park along the riverfront. You got to walk the DeQuinder Cut. You got to see the changes that have occurred along that riverfront and in downtown Detroit, how the city is beginning to move to that position of sustainable development and a place that is attractive to those young people. You know, I remember the days, and Andy will remember the days, and others in this room will remember the days when the salt piles were sitting on the riverfront. There's a cement plant down there. All of that has changed. It's a wonderful park, a beautiful park. I was there twice this year. Once, free fishing day, I went down to volunteer to help tie lines, teaching kids to fish. I'm a fisherman. That's what I love to do. Teaching kids how to fish and untangling knots and working with their parents. And our problem was there weren't enough volunteers. I mean, I was running around like a chicken with my head cut off, tying knots and untangling things and taking fish off of hooks and telling a kid where to cast his bobber, etc. We need more volunteers next year. So next year, Free Fishing Day, I hope everybody will volunteer to come down, help those kids in Detroit understand the importance of the natural resources by participating in something related to the natural resources. Free Fishing Day next year, that's one time I was down here. The second time I was down at the park was on July 4th. And it was encouraging to me, extremely encouraging to me, walk around that park on 4th of July, that riverfront park. People of every age, every race, families, friends, all doing all kinds of things on that riverfront, the way a city ought to look. The way a city ought to look. So if you haven't had the chance, please go down and visit Milliken Park. Please do it. You'll be amazed at how beautiful it is. You'll be amazed at what the Detroit River looks like. You know, people have this sense that the Detroit River is somehow a muddy cesspool. It is as clear as a bell. It's one of the great smallmouth fisheries in the entire world, and walleye fisheries in the entire world. It is a beautiful river. And while you're here, please take the opportunity to do so. I'm going to pause just for a minute because I just noticed that Councilman Cockrell is in the audience, and I know he wanted to give a welcome to all of you. So I'm going to pause, and I'll get right back up after I let him just give a welcome on behalf of Detroit. Is that okay, Ken?
Thank you very much. Good morning and welcome. And when I say welcome on behalf not only of the people of the city of Detroit, but also on behalf of the Detroit City Council, of which I'm a member. For those of you that don't know me, which I suspect is probably most of you, my name is Ken Cockrell Jr., and I am a member of the Detroit City Council. I am also the founder and chair of the Detroit City Council's Green Task Force. So with that in mind and with that agenda in mind, it truly is a profound honor to welcome you to the city of Detroit for this conference. Your participation here, I think, is really critical in helping us to protect and preserve one of our greatest natural resources. And I really also want to say that I want to thank you for actually choosing to do this conference here in the city of Detroit, which of course is right in the heart of the Great Lakes. But even despite that, there are a number of other places that you could have chosen to take this event. But the fact that you brought it here really means a lot to us in terms of the economic impact that your presence here over the course of the next couple of days is going to have. But the short-term economic impact is one thing. I also thank you for the profound and long-term economic impact that I think you're going to have as well, because I really see a conference like this as an opportunity to really engage in thought processes and dialogue about how we can protect and preserve what I said earlier is one of our greatest natural resources. Now, even though it's a great natural resource, the reality is we know that it's a resource that on a certain level is under assault, whether that's through the continued onslaught of invasive species such as the Asian carp, or whether that's through sewer overflows which affect our water quality. We face a variety of challenges, but really having the input of people like you coming together, talking about this and discussing what we can do, what sort of plans we can prepare, what sort of roadmaps we can lay out, I think is really going to be key for us ensuring that this is a resource that not only we can enjoy, but our children and our children's children can enjoy. So with that in mind, I just want to say first and foremost that, again, as founder and chair of the Green Task Force, one of the things that we have done is actually focus on water. So I'm very pleased to have actually been able to help to develop a water agenda. One of the people that you're going to hear from as a presenter during the course of this event is Melissa Damashki, who I see is seated right there. And she is actually playing a very active role in one of the subcommittees of the Detroit City Council Green Task Force, which is our water committee. And she has been critical in helping to develop a water agenda for the city of Detroit, and frankly an agenda that I think will not only benefit the city of Detroit, but which can actually be used as a model throughout southeastern Michigan and indeed throughout the entire state. You're also going to hear a bit later this morning from my point person in terms of coordinating a lot of the green activities that I run through my office, Ms. Rashani Dantist. She's going to be a panelist during, I believe it's the 10 o'clock session that's going to be taking place. So once again, I want to thank you for coming out. I want to thank you for your participation, and I want to thank you for being here, because you are truly helping to make a difference. You are truly helping to change the face of Michigan and truly helping to change the face of our Great Lakes. One of the things that we have been working on is not only the development of an agenda and a water policy agenda for the city of Detroit, but we've also been recognizing that the Great Lakes aren't only a resource, but they can also be a recreational resource. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the concept of blueways. And even though through the Detroit City Council, we have been very active in promoting the city of Detroit's first non-motorized plan, which strives to promote the development and growth of bike paths and walking paths throughout the city of Detroit. But we also recognize that our waterways can also be something that, from a recreational standpoint, can be key to the future of the city of Detroit. So with that in mind, we have also been working on developing a plan that allows us to facilitate kayaking along the Detroit River and along our waterways. This is just some of the great work that we've been doing, and I really see you all as partners in this, because this really is not just a Detroit agenda, it's a Great Lakes agenda. And you're here in reflection of that, and you're here to help to shape and form that agenda. So once again, thank you so much for coming. Thanks for being here. We welcome your thoughts, we welcome your dialogue, we welcome your ideas, because we know that those ideas, those thoughts, and that dialogue is what is going to help to make the difference. Thank you all so much. Best wishes for a successful conference.
Thank you, Councilman. And I'm going to pick up where I left off, which is just talking a little bit about Detroit for those of you who haven't been here. Again, go see the park. You got to go do it. You got to go see Milliken Park. Visit some of the nice places, the nice new place. If you haven't been to, how many have been to Slo's restaurant? You got to go, right, Ken? You got to go to Slo's. If you like barbecue, go to Slo's Restaurant. Great place, great place. They're here. Those places are here. And the buzz about Detroit across the nation is getting better and stronger. And that is helpful for Michigan, and it will be helpful for the Great Lakes if we can have a stronger Detroit. Now, I said I was going to talk about history, and that's what I'm going to do a little bit right now. One other quick little note. When I worked for Governor Milliken, one of the reasons I worked for Governor Milliken, and one of the reasons that I went to work for Governor Snyder, is because of their attitude about things. I had a teacher a long time ago when I was in high school. I was struggling with what I wanted to be, right? When you grow up, right? What do you want to be? And was I going to be a veterinarian? That's one of the thoughts I had. Was I going to be a professional fisherman? What was I going to do? And this teacher pulled me aside. He said, you know what? Quit worrying about what you want to be. Worry about what you want to do. And it changed my focus. And I look at people now from that perspective. It's not about being governor. Milliken didn't worry about being governor. It was about what he wanted to do, cleaning up the quality of the environment in Michigan. This governor, it's not about being governor. It's about what he wants to do. It's reinventing Michigan and reinventing the economy of Michigan. So that's a lesson, I think, for all the young people now. Don't worry about what you want to be. Worry about what you want to do. Let your passion drive where you want to go. I brought with me today a report from 1982 that I want to talk about just a little bit, because I happen to have worked on this conference that was done on Mackinac Island on June 10th and 11th of 1982, to give you a little perspective about where we've come and where we yet need to go. This was a conference that Governor Milliken put together that involved the states, the Great Lakes states. It's the first time they'd ever come together as states, and two provinces in Canada. And the names of the people, for, again, the old people in the audience here, Governor Milliken pulled it together on Mackinac Island. At the time, it was Jim Thompson, who was the governor of Illinois, Robert Orr, the governor of Indiana, Milliken from Michigan, Albert Quee from Minnesota, Hugh Carey from New York, and Jim Rhodes from Ohio. Those were the state participants in this conference. Oh, I'm sorry, and Richard Thornburg of Pennsylvania and Lee Dreyfus of Wisconsin. Those were the governors who were, at the time, 1982, the governors of those various states. They came to Mackinac Island, along with Bill Davis of Ontario and René Lévesque of Quebec. And it was the first time they'd ever sat down together to talk about the Great Lakes. And they adopted a number of resolutions at the time. And I just want to read a couple of those resolutions and talk about the history. This is the first time they talked about diversions, as an example. You know, at the time, there had been a proposal, for those of you who remember history, for a coal slurry pipeline, taking water from Lake Superior, using the water to slurry coal back. Big controversy. And the governors got together and had to make the choice about how we were going to treat our Great Lakes waters. What we were going to do. You know, there was a plan out there that had been kicking around since the 1950s called NOWAPA, North American Water and Power Alliance plan, that called for diverting some water in Canada down to the Great Lakes and then diverting water to the Mississippi River, et cetera, et cetera. So the Great Lakes governors said, well, look, we have a role in this. And here's what they said in 1982. They adopted a resolution that said, whereas the states and provinces in the Great Lakes Basin have been blessed with an incomparable water resource, and whereas increasing evidence points to severe freshwater shortages in other parts of the United States, shortages that are already apparent and are expected to reach major proportions in future decades, and whereas the search already has begun for alternative sources of water for those regions, with support for some of that search coming from the United States federal government, and whereas the water of the Great Lakes is needed to meet, listen to this, the water of the Great Lakes is needed to meet the current and future domestic, industrial, navigational, power, agricultural, and recreational needs of the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence region. And whereas the findings of the International Joint Commission's Great Lakes Diversions and Consumptive Uses Study Board indicates that we will be faced with substantial increases in consumptive uses within the basin over the next half century to meet our growing needs. And whereas the diversion of water from the Great Lakes Basin to other water basins reduces the net supply of water available to the Great Lakes Basin and lowers lake levels, and whereas lowered lake levels and reduction of flows in connecting channels could result in serious losses in water supply, navigation, and recreational values, causing critical economic, social, and environmental problems adverse to the people of the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence states and provinces. And whereas the wise use and development of the water resources of the Great Lakes is essential to the economy and prosperity of the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence states and provinces, and whereas the diversion of Great Lakes waters to other regions of the United States or Canada could result in severe restrictions in the growth and development of the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence region, and whereas it makes far more sense for development to occur where abundant supplies of fresh water already exist, rather than moving the water to other regions, and whereas we share tremendous responsibility for the stewardship of these natural resources which the Great Lakes provide, and whereas the Boundary Water Agreement of 1909 requires that any change in the flows and levels of any boundary waters is subject to approval by the federal governments of both the United States and Canada, now therefore be it resolved by the Great Lakes states and provinces that based on existing information they object to any new diversion of Great Lakes water for the use outside the Great Lakes states and provinces. And be it further resolved that no future diversions be considered until a thorough assessment involving all jurisdictions contiguous to the Great Lakes system of the impacts on navigation, power generation, the environment, and socioeconomic development for all said jurisdictions takes place. And be it further resolved that any future decision on the diversion of Great Lakes waters for use outside of the Great Lakes states and provinces be made only with the concurrence of the Great Lakes states, the United States federal government, and the federal government of Canada and the provinces contiguous to the Great Lakes system. That was 1982, June of 1982. 26 years later, we have a Great Lakes Compact. That's where it began. That's where it began. So taking that long-term perspective, you know, you go back, Milliken started it, Blanchard kept it going. Dave Dempsey did a lot of great work continuing to move these states forward. This was just a resolution. It had no force, no impact. Blanchard kept it going. Engler kept it going. Patty Burkholz did a great job. People like John Allen of Consumers Energy and Noah Hall working for the National Wildlife Federation kept it going. 26 years later, we got a Great Lakes Compact adopted by all the states, the provinces, and the federal and the U.S. federal government, the Congress. It's an amazing story. It's that long-term perspective that all of us have to have, keeping your eye on the ball and keeping at it. It's the only way you ever get anything done. You know, when I worked for the Center for the Great Lakes, Andy mentioned that right after Milliken left office in 1982, we created an organization called the Center for the Great Lakes that morphed into a whole lot of other things, including you and the Council of Great Lakes, the governors, and other things. But I was getting really frustrated, you know, when I was working there, because it was hard to get all these states and business and industry and environmental groups to work together toward a common agenda. It was really hard, really hard. I was getting frustrated. We weren't accomplishing enough. And one of my board members was Harlan Hatcher, who was a past president of the University of Michigan. He pulled me aside one day and he said this to me. He said, you know what? Nothing really important ever, what you got to understand is nothing really important ever gets accomplished in less than 7 years. He's a great historian. He said nothing important ever gets done in anything less than 7 years. Nothing really important. It took 26 years to get here. From here to a Great Lakes Compact. I look back and I remarked, when I thought at the time, you know, Andy mentioned I had done the bottle bill. That took 7 years. From the time Milliken proposed it to finally getting it on the ballot, getting it adopted by the people of the state was 7 years. So in an age today when we all want tweets and quick responses, you got to understand that the things that are really important take time. They take time and they take commitment. One of the other resolutions here relates to Great Lakes water quality, again adopted in 1982. I'll just read parts of that one. What it said, I got to find it now. What it says is, whereas the United States and Canada have entered into an agreement to protect the water quality of the Great Lakes, whereas the position of the Great Lakes states that such an agreement is vital and necessary to assure the continued high quality of the Great Lakes. This is back in the old Water Quality Agreement. And whereas Ontario and Canada have a federal-provincial agreement which funds their obligation to the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, and whereas the Comptroller General of the United States has found the United States is having difficulty meeting its commitments under the agreement, and whereas the Great Lakes states were not signatories to the 1972 and 1978 Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, and whereas many of the programs necessary to meet the objectives of the agreement are the responsibilities of the state, and whereas it is clear that United States funding is now recommended would not be adequate to meet agreement objectives related to municipal wastewater treatment quality programs, Great Lakes monitoring, and Great Lakes research, and whereas no mechanism exists that relates the responsibilities of the United States government and the government of the Great Lakes states to meet the objectives of the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, now therefore be it resolved by these governors that there be transmitted to the President of the United States Congress a request for the establishment of a formal arrangement between the United States government and the Great Lakes states to meet the objectives of the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, and that adequate funding be directed to maintain research, monitoring, and programs essential to the implementation of the terms of the agreement. Now, we still have that challenge, in part, but think about the changes that have occurred since 1982 in that regard. The states are more involved in those Great Lakes Water Quality Agreements. We have the Great Lakes Initiative. We have federal money now being put into the Great Lakes states to deal with our areas of concern, to deal with the research that is necessary to deal with the implementation of Great Lakes water quality. Again, a long-term perspective. Understanding where you've been. My dad always used to tell me, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. Knowing where you're going is key to success. That's what I liked about Governor Milliken. That's what I like about Governor Snyder. Knowing where they want to go and keeping that idea, that ideal out there as the direction that they want to go. So those are just a couple things I wanted to mention out of this little booklet. That it is a long-term issue. You know, we're not going to. One of the things a lot of people don't understand about government is that government never really solves a problem. You know, it's never solved. You know, people want to say, well, if you just did this, it'll. No, you make progress slowly. You make progress toward achieving a goal. You're never going to have a perfect tax system. I'll tell you that right now. It's going to change and morph over time. We're never going to protect everything as it relates to our water quality. It's going to change and morph over time, but we got to continually get better. It's a question of getting better, not solving once and for all the problems, because they're never going to go away. So it requires people who care, and are willing to put their nose to the grindstone to really get something done. That's how progress is achieved. Tom Anderson was a legislator in Michigan who was the sponsor for the Michigan Environmental Protection Act, sponsor of the Wetlands Act back when Milliken was governor, Democrat from Southgate. This was a time when you could work in a bipartisan fashion, which is a little troubling today that it's hard to do that. But he told me something when I was, again, getting frustrated with what the legislature wouldn't do on a bill, and he pulled me aside and said, look, you know, what you got to understand is in this process, never let the perfect be the enemy of the possible. Keep moving forward. Don't hold out for the perfect, because you got to wait till the right things happen. So there are lessons in history. There are understanding where we've come, how these things initiated, how they started, where they started, is important to understanding where we need to go in the future. It means that this organization has a lot of work to do. It has work to do in terms of not only keeping the agenda moving forward, but in pulling other people into the coalition. We need more African Americans involved in conservation and the environment. It's got to happen. We've all got to care about our cities. We got to do things like helping a young African American kid to learn to fish. That is important. I'll tell you, the look I got on the face of those kids, I'll never forget when they caught their first fish. I'll never forget it. So we've got a lot of work to do to pull this this movement, this idea, this ideal on behalf of the Great Lakes together. We've got to be willing to reach out to others. Got to develop the kind of common understanding about why sustainable development is important for the long-term future, why you can have a quality environment and a quality economy and a fair system of dealing with people all at the same time. There's a lot of work to do. I know this organization, this Healing Our Water. I know Peter Wege, public sector, when I was at public sector, was involved in this to a large extent. It's a great opportunity. And that's the way in which progress is made. Progress is always made by good, hardworking people who are willing to spend the time to really understand the issues and then push, not wanting something perfect, but pushing toward what is possible in terms of progress. So, on behalf of Governor Snyder, thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for choosing to do this conference in Detroit. And thank you for all the work you're going to do in the future. Thank you.